Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Comix Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of April. I'm Brian Hibbs, your host and owner of Comix Experience, and the book this month is The Awesome by Night by Christine Larsen, who we have here in studio with us, and John Allison, who's coming in via remote from England. Hello.
Hello.
Yay! Excellent book. The staff really loved this book a lot, and we're going to talk about it. But before we start talking about the book, let's talk about your guys and being in comics. And my first question always is why? Why comics? What is it about comics that excites you, that you decided to put your creative energies into versus all the other things you could be doing in life? Christine, when we start with you.
I'm going first. I hate that. All right. I don't know. I kind of feel like comics found me, sort of. I didn't really even draw my first comic till I was like 23, 24.
Oh, cool.
So, it's when I got out of school, I went for illustration and I was just trying to get paid to draw pictures.
Yes.
And I think I just kind of slipped nicely into comics and really enjoyed the process of making them and the storytelling element. And, obviously it's still worth it because I wouldn't still be doing it. It's not like I'm rolling in the money. So, so it's, I just enjoy the process. I think it also suits my sensibilities very well in terms of like the work I like to do. That sort of thing.
Did you read comics when you were younger?
Not like mainstream stuff.
Sure.
I think the first comic I picked up because I was stoked about it was like Tank Girl. I was like, that's my favorite thing. And then, I read like Kabuki and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, but I never really got into like mainstream books until I was older and then doing comics, and it became almost like part of the research. Even going back to like Kirby and Ditko and like those are the guys I kind of related to in terms of like superhero books and mainstream stuff. It was like 60s mainstream stuff. So it's weird because I was a teenager in the 90s, and that's when comics had that big boom. And it was like all the super dark stuff. And it just wasn't my thing in terms of like what was out. But I think I sort of found the stuff I liked amidst all that. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. How about you, John? You've been doing comics a really long time. Why comics?
It was a good, lazy job that I figured you could do at home and you wouldn't really have to worry about going out and seeing people. I decided to start doing comics as soon as I finished college, and I had to get a job, obviously, but I needed to look busy in the house because I basically moved back in with my mum and dad, and I needed to look like I was doing something while I was failing to like get job interviews. And making comics made you look really busy all the time. Like it's a hard job. You're writing, then you're drawing, then you're scanning. It looked, just the level of productivity was incredible. It was such a smokescreen. I mean, I did have to do a lot of work to create that smokescreen. But then when I got a job, I'd made so many like comic strips, like to submit to newspaper syndicates, which sounds ludicrously archaic now, but I just kept making them and putting them online. And that's kind of what started my webcomics career in about 1998, when there weren't really webcomics, there were only a few. So then I just rolled on from there. I just kind of learned on the job because I had no artistic training and wasn't a particularly capable artist beyond what everybody makes as a teenager, bad superhero comics.
So you didn't go to school at all for
No, I went to school for journalism. I have a degree in journalism. So that's useful in a way, but not applicable to the artistic side of it at all. I just had to learn in public on the job by drawing and drawing and drawing every day.
Yeah. Well, and those webcomics are great too. I mean, Bad Machinery is great. We all
thanks.
Love it here. When you started in webcomics, I'm real curious about that because it seems like there's not really a way to monetize that for most people.
Not now. Well, it was different. The internet has changed completely in 20 years. It's not the same. Like when we started, there was very little merchandise of that sort. The whole indie space online was quite fertile. Once you built up an audience, that audience was hungry. They were hungry for merchandise. They were hungry just for anything really to sort of support these tiny micro businesses that they felt very attached to. So we made money by selling t-shirts and then by printing books of our work. And you had an audience that was perhaps much bigger than it would have been for like a stapled indie comic. Like the black and white scene was what had preceded us immediately.
Sure.
But there was no way to monetize that. But with the internet and also a kind of brains trust of people all trying to make these little micro businesses work, there was a way to make money. And as long as you were modest in your expectations, you couldn't live in New York City and do this, but you could live in a kind of backwoods town as I did and kind of get the job done really on that budget. Yeah.
No, it's much harder today though, because there's so much more out there and just wanting for that same attention, the same eyeballs, I don't see how people do webcomics as their primary thing today.
It's hard now, but social media took away a lot of the eyeballs from webcomics. Like webcomics audience was people at college or at work goofing off, just clicking through archives and reading hundreds and hundreds of comic strips because they just couldn't be bothered to do any work. But now they go on Facebook and argue with people. That's like the national sport, isn't it? It's an international sport. And so that space is just very different now. It's kind of careerist people getting ready to kind of pitch something to Image, or it's older people who built an audience back when you could build an audience, or it's like mega talented people who are just super breakouts, sort of virally, people like Sarah Grayley who come through Instagram and things like that, where you can still make a connection, but it's harder to transition in a kind of careerist way into doing that for a living. Lightning has to strike essentially.
Sure. Now, since you didn't have any training as an artist, and you kind of fell into comics as it were, now that you're just writing comics, do you feel that your experience as a cartoonist informs the way that you write your scripts today?
Oh, without question. And I still think of myself as an artist, just an artist who doesn't have enough time to draw more than one comic. So I'm lucky to have worked with amazing artists like Christine and Max Sarin and Lissa Trayman, who are cartoonists first and foremost, rather than kind of comic book artists, because I don't know that I could communicate my ideas to someone who had a background, even someone who's like great, like a Green Lantern or like a Wonder Woman type artist. Mm-hmm. But I'm doing something that comes out of cartooning and strips more than comic books. And so the people who've interpreted my work have to sort of be of that mindset as well. And Christine's great at that. It's 100% emotions all the time, even if it's orcs or whatever. The pathway is there, but it's a slightly different pathway perhaps to other comics writers.
Yeah. Where did By Night come from?
Oh, that's. I feel like that's
I'm looking at both of you.
Yeah.
Polite to look to the person next to you.
Oh God. I went to San Diego Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and I sat down with Shannon Waters and Jasmine Amory, who has left Boom now, but was my editor and assistant or associate editor on Giant Days. And they said, "You got anything else?" And I said, "No." And then I said, "No, I haven't got anything else. I've barely got enough ideas to go around. This is about the last scrape of margarine in the tub, and I'm spreading it out over the bread every month." So Shannon gave me like the seed of an idea, which she said was about a haunted cable TV channel. I think those words she used. Now, no part of that original brief remains. Like, you can imagine, it's like I built a car and then I replaced every piece of the car because the car had square wheels by the time I built it and a big fin on top that just fell off when you tried to drive it. So at one point I had sort of the cable TV station, and it was like an Elvira type thing. And Jane in the comic was going to, she was going to go into the monster dimension. She was going to come back with films. And every week she was then going to present what she'd found Elvira style. That didn't work at all. So in the end, what was left was kind of the going into the dimension, but none of the cable TV stuff at all. And so what's come out of it is completely different. But sometimes you need that germ to start you on the path to where you eventually get, and that's By Night's quite a circuitous route, if you like.
Yeah. So when did you get involved?
I was working on a lot of their Cartoon Network licensed properties like Adventure Time and Regular Show. And my editor, Whitney Leopard, who also left, and she's at Random House Graphic now. She got me in touch with Shannon, and I did, I think, a test page, and I guess they showed it to you. That's all I can assume, and that's the end. It was actually very standard, like editors getting together, being like, stick her there, kind of thing, which was cool. I'm always down to do a test page.
Yeah. Were you asking for work outside of the licensed material, or? No,
actually, I had actually already pitched something to Boom that is in the process of doing a thing, but Whitney's like, you would be good for this. I had a really good relationship with her, and I was like, yeah, I hadn't done a monthly since I was like on Kung Fu Panda, which was years ago when Ape had it, and I don't think I've ever done like a creator owned monthly. So I was like, this is good. This will get me back in shape to do this longer thing I want to do. Cause I had done some like more illustration type work. I don't just do comics. Like I do the whole round. So, it definitely got me back on doing a schedule. That was something. Schedule work is. I feel like monthly comics are kind of like when you're pregnant and before you have a second baby, you have to forget what that pregnancy was like. Like I don't know if I'm going to do a monthly for a little bit. Sure. Give myself a break.
How long does it take you to do a page, out of curiosity?
What do you mean, like from soup to nuts?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, sure.
So it's weird because I kind of am doing the layouts while I'm inking. I can ink like 3 pages in a day if it's like a good productive day. And layouts take me the longest. I could probably get, what do I do? Like 2-3 spreads a day. So I don't know, like say 45 minutes and then a couple of hours to ink it. Probably like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, that seems nice and swift. That seems like totally capable of monthly comic production.
I mean, and by night is definitely not like super detailed. Like I'm not sitting there hatching a jacket for 20 minutes. So, so yeah, it's, you make decisions based on like the time you have and, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the difference between doing a creator-owned book like by night and working on licensed comics. I assume that when you do licensed comics, every page is potentially coming back.
It depends on the license.
Sure.
When I was doing the DreamWorks stuff for Ape years ago, that was not an enjoyable experience. But the Cartoon Network stuff was really fun. I even had written some of them. And there weren't a ton of notes when they came back. And they pretty much just let me do their characters in my style. I didn't have to like stress, stress the character sheets or anything like that. So the Cartoon Network stuff was a lot of fun. And then I did a Samurai Jack for IDW too. I did an issue of that, and that was okay. But in terms of like the actual process, it's like you get a script, you lay out the script, you send it in. I would say there's less turnaround time for the approvals. Okay. You know, like I can get stuff in and everyone's like, cool. And then I can just keep going as opposed to, getting stuck in that, like, now we're waiting for 3 weeks for this approvals to get through. Right. And that like screws up your end deadline a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you guys, anybody in the audience have any questions? I could keep talking if you want, but no one else is going to talk.
No.
Great. I'll keep talking.
There's just fear on the faces of everyone. I'm very intimidating. So it's true. All
right. Well, let's talk a little maybe about process then. John, when you are writing a script, for another, artist, how do you start? What do you do?
Well, By Night, again, is different because every other comic I've ever done, I've always drawn an issue before I've had to write a script for anybody else for it. So Giant Days, I'd done 3 issues of it myself as indie comics. By Night was the first comic where I had to look at the first blank page, say, I don't know how the artist is going to approach this, and I don't know how I'm going to approach this. So I remember sitting and thinking, right, well, I better get everything in there, the best issue of anything I've ever written, because I've never written an issue like this before. It's not a good way to approach your first issue. It's like, you just sit there kind of tearing your hair out for the first morning, and then you start to think, no, I'll just write it like I normally do. So what I do is I write a 22-page list. I just write a list with like a couple of sentences for each page first. And I always get that signed off before I start writing the issue because I hate having to do edits. I'm just lazy. So I try to stack up the work beforehand. So I have a paragraph synopsis of the issue. Then I write the numbers 1 to 22 and write what's going to happen on every page, perhaps with a little note about a joke or something like that seems appropriate for it. Then by the time I get to page 1, there might be 1,000 words on that initial breakdown document I've done. So the script is perhaps 4,500, 5,000 words with the description. So it's kind of a fifth done if you think about it. So I've tricked myself essentially by the time I get to the first page. So with By Night, I'm thinking, got to write some good scenes for Christine to draw. Mustn't have people sitting around a table too much because that's brutal. I hate drawing that. And so, real artists must really, really hate drawing that. It's dreadful. People sitting around a table. I know Bendis loves people around a table. He's a monster. He's a monster. And then, get some good set pieces in so that there's some fun stuff to draw. With By Night as well, it was meant to be this very monstery series, which is, I think, why they picked Christine for it. But my problem was that it was so plot heavy. I was like, better get some monsters into this by the end of the issue. And some of the issues, it's like, oh God, we didn't go to the monster dimension at all. And there are only 12 issues of this. So then I would think, right, plenty of monsters in the next one. So that, Christine service, I call it, as I'm sort of on my writing away. Got to be some Christine service in this. Got to get some monsters in there. And that makes for some fun. It's like there's a push and pull between my desire to just write about business. There's a lot of business in By Night. And also that I've got to give Christine a lot of monsters. So I get the monster business balance right. That's it. Script finished.
Do you thumbnail them out at all or anything like that for yourself?
Sometimes, if it's an action page, because I come from webcomics, there wasn't a lot of action in there. And also because I've started drawing more difficult comics recently myself, if it's an action page, I will block it out on the page. Even though Christine's layouts, I don't specify to Christine, put the panels here, 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 and here. And Christine will lay it out completely differently to how I did it. But I know that the page works. And I had to start doing that because very occasionally I would do a page for Giant Days where it wouldn't work for Max, and I'd have to go back and rough it out and say, that's why this doesn't work, because I've spun the camera 6 times in this panel. And so the angle wouldn't actually work. And so I'd break it down. So for By Night, I would always, any action sequence, I'd make sure that you could move through the panels correctly and that nothing got lost. No item was lost during the making of this page. So that's how it works, really. I have thumbnailed whole issues, but it's usually just because I've not got any drawing jobs on and I'm a bit bored. It's quite good fun just to draw a really rough, silly comic instead of having to type on the computer.
Sure. And you're, it sounds like you're giving a full script with page 1, panel 1. Here's what happens. Here's some dialogue.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That is what I get.
Okay.
Yeah. I like to write in any emotional notes on it. So it's not like a Frank Miller script where it's just like a wet fist hits the side of a face. I have to, there's always some kind of mood going on. There may be a wet fist and there may be a face, but how does the wet fist feel?
About hitting that face.
and so Christine, when you receive that script, what's the first thing that you do?
I usually print it out and then I'll do what I like to think of as like breakdowns. So I draw all over that script and make a mess of things. And then, I spent a couple days doing that. You'd think I'd have I shouldn't swear. You'd think I'd have everything more together when I actually go to lay out, but it always ends up like changing completely by the time I get onto the computer. I usually check to make sure like I'm not repeating panel sequences too much. Like it's not like 2 and 1 and 3 and like 7 pages in a row. But then sometimes I've definitely gotten pages where I'm just like, I don't know. So I'll just put the panels on there and make it fit. But yeah, sounds weird. I'll take it into the computer and I do my layouts digitally. So it's kind of like putting a puzzle together, I guess. That's what I think about it. Like that's why they take me so long, because I'm like moving stuff and I put all the dialogue in and move stuff around, make sure like there's bubble movement and also character movement so that the page works. And then I just print those out huge in yellow ink on my large format printer. And then I just like really quick, rough and better perspective and ink on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the end.
That's interesting. So you're digitally laying it. So you're digitally doing roughs and then printing it.
Huge.
Wow.
I print it huge.
Wow.
And
I don't think we've heard that. Jordan, have we heard that one before? No. That's great. One of the things I love about this, you guys are the, I want to say 120th cartoonists that we've interviewed. No one has ever given me the same answers of how do I make comics. This is my favorite thing about comics.
I think everyone kind of, beats down the horse in their own way, different tools, I guess. I like to, I don't know, not spend too much time in one thing. I think the first issue I did do proper pencils for because I was still kind of feeling the characters out. But after that, I had a really good sense of everything and I just was able to print it large and just draw on top of that and not do too much tightening except when I had to do like perspective. I force a lot of perspective in there to make sure that the dialogue fits in a nice way. Also, I feel like that's just my style of panel layouts. I just force a lot of perspective. But yeah, it's I try to knock them out at a good pace, but also so they look good, So yeah, I also hate transferring, so I just print everything out.
Oh, that's cool. At what point here is the editor involved art-wise? I mean, are you showing the editor your layouts?
I show them my roughs and I show them my inks.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty good about letting me go.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really. I'm trying to think. Yeah, only John really catches if I forget to throw something in the background.
I think we have a pretty free hand, really, because I think we get things in on time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just let us do whatever we want. It's kind of like, oh, I hope this is okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like a pretty good working situation.
Oh yeah, it's extremely chill. That's really nice. Yeah, I can't really complain about our editors at all. They're very
No. I think we're quite a low maintenance team. We get everything in on time, and we work well together. I think it's a nice working relationship.
Yeah, like it's funny. This is the first time that we're having a conversation in person. Everything's been through email now, so yeah.
You haven't even done on the phone?
No. Calls to the UK are expensive.
I don't know, not with the internet these days.
No, I don't know.
Do those Skype voice calls.
Well, I always think Christine, spends enough of her time, serving my whims and fancies. She doesn't need to then have to also listen to me just going on like wild, airy, fairy notions about what I'm thinking. Oh, there's going to be a lot of business in this one, Christine. I can't wait. This was really about a massive merger.
Get ready to draw lots of papers. Oh no. Mentally preparing myself.
Do you guys talk out the book much in advance, or are you just getting the scripts and doing it up?
I'm usually good. Maybe because I have worked with writers so much, I'm usually totally happy just to get a script. Especially because like John's not telling me like where to put panels at. He's like, lets me go. And I like that. Like I don't need to know like where exactly you want all your stuff. Mm-hmm. I know where stuff can go. I'm older than I look. I've been in the game for a bit. So it's nice not to have that dictated. But yeah, it's in terms of the story, like John's the writer. I'm going to let him go wherever he wants. If he ever hit something that I was like, oh, that's problematic, but he hasn't. So it's not an issue.
And I guess the same question in reverse. You trust her, obviously.
Yes. Oh yeah, I do. And also I feel like Christine's, half the book is hers. I want her to have half the ownership of the book by what she's put into it. I don't want her to feel that she's just been given, instructions, draw this like this, be like this, but it's because she's talented. I want to see what she can do. And you give someone space to do what they're capable of, you get the rewards back. And I think that's been evident in the issues. There've been loads of things in there where I've looked at one issue and that's given me an idea for a later issue because there was interesting stuff in there that I wanted to build on visually, that if I'd just been specifying everything, it wouldn't have been half the book it was, because, the collaboration is what makes it more interesting than me just having on the tiller the whole time, demanding. A few character designs for this book that I did, but it was really just to save Christine a bit of time on generic human character designs, really. That was the idea. Just so you've not got to think of another kind of Dakota individual, which Yeah. So, but with like all the monsters and stuff, you get a free hand because you're going to do it better than me anyway. You don't need my help.
Oh, thank you. Just to say, yeah, that's right. It's been pretty. I feel like it's been pretty streamlined the whole way through. Definitely not stressed it that much.
Yeah. Fire engines. How is writing by night different than writing Giant Days? I think there's an obvious answer there, you know. But talk about it a little bit, I guess.
There are 3 ways it's different, and I've said that without knowing what those 3 ways are going to be, but I'm going to cut with 3 things on the fly because I'm a professional. 1, it's American, and I am not American. But the whole, you grow up with American culture in Britain, you are the great cultural monolith. So one has a basic understanding of how the different parts of America work, and anything that you don't know, your editor will tell you you've made a terrible mess of. So that's fine. And then it all gets fixed. Sophie, she sets us straight every month, or me, sets old Johnny straight about how people live in the Dakotas. 2, how it's different from Giant Days is that it's got a lot more plot. It's got to be resolved in 12 issues. Giant Days is designed where every issue is kind of like, could be someone's first issue. So there's a whole Seinfeld style story in there, Whereas By Night is a maxi series. It was designed to be 12 issues, and I think it's less necessary to give people a jumping on point every issue. I think every issue I've tried to make as solid as a Giant Days issue in terms of the amount of story, but we have a little previously on, which is something which I was hesitant about, but at the same time, we've only got these pages, however many, 240 pages or whatever to tell the story. So I can't be constantly justifying myself. And then the 3rd way that it's different is that Giant Days is part of my wider comics universe of interconnected series, because everything I've done has kind of fed out of the initial webcomics that I did. And even though they don't feed back in the way like the Marvel universe does, it's all connected, whereas this was new from whole cloth. So I had to build it anew and also make it different enough from my old stuff where it wasn't just generic Allison brand. It had to have newness. So that's 3 things. Yeah. Told you, professional.
That was really good. That was really good. So, because as you say, the Giant Days stuff is fluid, it's happening, and this has a structure. Did you structure those 12 issues out as well? I heard you talking earlier about structuring each issue out, but do you have a 12 issue structure that you've been looking at?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I had a 12 issue structure, and initially By Night was going to be 6 issues, I think. And there was a different, simpler structure where it was more open-ended. But when it was 12, it was like, I can tell this story in such a way that you set it up as if there was going to be if there could be a second season. But if there wasn't a second season, it would be 100% satisfying, because 12 is enough to do that, I think. And so, yeah, I wrote what would happen in every issue, and I looked at them and thought, this one serves this purpose. Like the 3rd issue, which is in the first trade, is where the boys get to know each other. And that wouldn't have been really possible if it had just been the 6 issues. But I love that issue. That's one of my favorites of the first 4, because it's like, these characters weren't so important when I started thinking about this comic, but they became much more important when there were 12 issues to carry. So I could do things like that. But yeah, I broke it down into 12, and I sent all the synopses off, and they all made sense to me as a whole. It was a lot of thinking. I had to spend a lot of time just scratching the top of my head and trying to work out how you made this little, a 12 issue series thing, because it was something I hadn't done before. Everything had been open ended before.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what I was asking. Have you found that going along with that outline has been working okay? Or did you get, to issue 7 and go, oh shoot, I need like all these other things to happen, or, oh wait, there's too much here, or,
No, because I've done all those issues of Giant Days, I do them in 6-month blocks, and there would be like arcs within those blocks. So with this, I just restricted my arcs. I said, this is what we're allowed to have. And I sort of know from so many years of doing different books of different lengths, roughly what goes into 120 pages. I know roughly how much you can get into it. And so and when I doubled that, I knew how much you could get into 240 pages. So it's worked fine. I wrote the last 2 issues together, issues 11 and 12 together, to make sure that nothing had been lost, that I didn't write issue 11 and then start to write issue 12 and go, oh no, there's not space. I wrote them as like a double length finale, if you like, so that I knew that all the elements were in there. Again, it's like when I block out the pages because it's an action page, just don't lose anything. Make sure you haven't lost anything because there won't be any chance to put it in afterwards.
Yeah, it's interesting because comics are pretty much the only form, I think, that we create as it's being published. Like even television stuff is done way in advance of broadcast.
Yeah. I don't know. I think. I have always enjoyed comics with endpoints personally.
Sure.
Like, I'm probably more of like a trade graphic novel guy. So, honestly, I like that the series had an endpoint. It's nice to tell a story and then be done with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I don't think of comics like that because when I came in, like the stuff I liked always was like, here's a book, But yeah, I don't know.
Well, yeah, but you were talking about things like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which certainly wasn't planned as a book. Like those were individual issues that were just meant to be as wacky as they were.
But since I own all of them. That was like the one series I would buy every month. Yeah. Since I own all of them, there's just an arc there. Like, I don't know how much he, I can never pronounce his name. Vasquez?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, look at me. I don't know how much he pre-planned any of that. Yeah. But it definitely has a feel of completeness when you read them in a straight line.
Right.
I don't know.
I just feel like it has that 80s, I'm making it up as I go along. It is, I agree that it does have a feeling of completeness, but
it totally can be, definitely. Listen, I don't know how much anyone plans anything, to be honest. That comic was definitely jokes and jokes and jokes. Yeah. So it's definitely a different feel than necessarily something with a larger overarching theme. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Do we have any questions? You came, Hamilton, so I thought you might have a cool question. No?
Why does the machine that opens the portal, what type of moon does it use? Like full moon, crescent moon?
I think it's full moon, right? We've kind of done it.
Oh. Now, like the amount of moon, the amount of moon determines how big the portal is. That is the only thing I thought about when I did it. Now, the whole story takes place over quite a short period of time, and so the moon is full virtually for the whole series. But there is a point later in the series where the moon is weak and small, and the portal is much smaller. So that is. It uses it. The portal is the same size as the moon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Cool. What was your favorite part, Hamilton?
Them exploring the different world that the portal goes to.
The other world? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Fantasy dimension. Yeah. What was it about fantasy dimensions?
Yeah. So how do you, that's a great question. Thanks for coming up with it.
You're welcome.
No. But when you're creating a fantasy dimension out of a whole cloth, how do you approach that as a designer?
So many people have asked me that, and I cannot tell you. I like all kinds of things. And I think that I've always had a very broad range of input for stuff that I like. I have like a very deep love of folklore, just general world folklore. And I think, you cherry pick, right? It's what John made was more humorous. So you go funny, right? And then I've definitely done stuff that is more like acid trip, strange, just for my own stuff. And I think it's you base it off the tone And I mean, I was a kid from the 80s. All of that was like people going into another dimension, basically, for like a decade. That was like kids' movies.
Sure.
So I don't know. I guess I just pull from a lot of sources and I kind of like feel out what works best visually. And I wish there was a better process, which there really, really is.
Sure.
I just make the best choices I think I should make.
So that feeling out process, that was obviously sketching, and sketching, and sketching, and sketching.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, the last issue of this with the owl creature, right? I think John's exact note was there. It was like, have fun. And I was like, well, it's going to be an owl. And that was like it. Like, it was, she had to look like regal, right? Or something like that. Like, he kind of gave a feeling she should have. Right. But I was like, it's going to be a three-eyed owl with double set wing. Like, I kind of like, I felt that out really quick. I kind of like start with a base and just sort of build off of that.
And John, when you see what she's done, does that change what you do in the future?
It does. Again, because this series was quite tight with the amount of space, I couldn't branch out too far. You know, I couldn't start to indulge in wilder and wilder fantasies as much as I might have liked to, because I'd created so little headroom for myself, story-wise, that I couldn't push too hard. But certainly what I saw in those first issues then informed the way I wrote that place in the following issues. And certainly in the very last issues, like there's a point, I say, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but there's certainly a point where a mountain with a huge eye appears, and it's quite important to the later parts of the series. That's look at my symbol. That's how I think of a mountain. It's a triangle.
Standard mountain.
Triangle. But that was absolutely based on the fact that that what Christine had drawn made me think, right, yes, I understand how this has to be, and there has to be a mountain with a huge eye, because that's what this universe needs to kind of rule over it all. That's the way it looks. It's the sort of place where there would just be a big living mountain.
Yeah. And I don't know what the next question I wanted to ask was.
I don't know what you want to ask me.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what I want to ask you, actually. Wow, I just hit up. Yeah, there we go.
Well, the one thing I love about the book is its sense of place. It's two very distinct places. It's the small town and then the fantasy world, and the small town feels very blue collar, working class, and the fantasy world is very surreal. So, can you guys talk a little bit about like what it was on the page, and then versus what you kind of put the paper, and then how it evolved? Because there's some reoccurring places in each space, like the bar and some forest stuff, and just how it expanded, because it has such a great sense of place in both of them. Very unique.
I don't know. Do you want to start with that, John? Or
yeah, I'll start. Well, I wrote it as this series didn't necessarily have to be American, and initially I thought I was going to set it in the northeast of England, in a kind of, which is again an economically depressed part of the country. And so I just transposed over these things to America, to a part of America that I knew a little bit about, because I'd worked with somebody who'd bought a school in South Dakota as some sort of tax dodge, and put their business inside it in this kind of run-down South Dakota town. I've still never quite got to the bottom of why they did this, because they lived in California. They lived really near San Diego. They were in the sunshine. They were like, do you know what we need? South Dakota, Cresbard, South Dakota. Let's move there into a haunted school and just fill it with madness. So that was why I put it there. And that was, my sense of place was based entirely almost on the stories that he told me, and about what I'd read about communities like that. I'm very interested in America and what goes on, and the sort of depressed parts of the country. People still live there. They're as valid a human being as anywhere else. They have to get on with their lives, and moving is hard. So I wanted to talk about the people who get left behind.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, in terms of like the town itself, I grew up in the Pine Barrens. The town I grew up in, like, there's trailer parks in there. There were trailer parks in the town I grew up in. I actually, when I was a kid, our house was like a 2-bedroom farmhouse. We had like 3 acres. And it sounds fancy, but it wasn't. It was not fancy. I got out of there as soon as I could. So a lot of spectrum is the town I grew up in, like a lot. Like it's surprisingly, like that street is a little more like I would say you would find in Pennsylvania, like an old coal town. That's where I was pulling visual reference from. And then but the actual feel of it, like I know that town. I grew up in that town. And then I live in North Philadelphia, which also has its fair share of urban decay.
Sure.
So it's kind of a balance of kind of knowing the place that John is sort of talking about. Like I totally identify with that place 100%.
Yeah.
And the fantasy stuff is just the fantasy stuff in terms of the surrealism of it. That's just like where I like to go. It's like my Mobius influence, I guess.
Yeah.
But drawing that town was kind of weirdly cathartic.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's good. Was it cathartic for you to write?
It was cathartic for me to write. I just remembered that I also lived in the most economically depressed town in England. I always forget that now because I'm trying to put it behind me. But I lived there for 14 years. So I kind of lived amongst urban decay all the time. It's weird. I now live in the southeast of England, which is economically prosperous, even though I don't live in like, a golden mansion. But it's the contrast between how people see themselves in the two parts of the country is much more evident to me now. And I think about it all the time because the contrast is really peculiar to me. The way people carry themselves and the confidence and the just sort of, even people who are working class have more money here. I don't see the economic deprivation that I saw in the northwest of England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're in that circumstance to not keep yourself trapped in that circumstance.
Yeah, I definitely know people who didn't get out.
Yeah.
It's like I remember being a kid and being like, nope, I'm not dying here.
Yeah.
So there were lots of good parts of growing. I don't want it to sound like it was like the worst.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Like we had a tight family with really good community. I have like really good friends I'm still friends with, but like a lot of them managed to get out, and I'm like happy for that because we didn't get stuck there. And now like developers got on the board. Like the town I grew up in, my parents aren't even there anymore. It got like overdeveloped and it's underfunded. So there's like there are like some whole developments like the old from the 60s and 70s that are empty. Like those houses are falling down and apart. And then there's like sections of the town that are like brand new like McMansions that have people in them. So it's a very bizarre turnover in terms of like what that town looks like now versus what I grew up in versus when my dad was there when he grew up there. So I don't know. It's strange to see how a place changes over time.
Yeah.
I actually think they do have a little more money now. It seems like the richer parts of the town are a little more full and the poor parts are kind of everyone left.
Right.
Like there's way less trailer parks. There's no more biker bars. That's all gone. So yeah, my parents moved out of there.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Working class hero was a big thing when I grew up. Like my dad was union, like that blue collar, like screw the man, like you know what I mean? Like that was huge. I have uncles that are bikers, like you know what I mean? So there's a lot of that, I think, in how I draw the people of Spectrum too. Because I remember that. There's like a lot of pride in the fact that you can make it with nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's also the flip side of that you're there forever.
Yeah.
And you're always fighting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Bringing it down, folks.
No, that's good. No, it's good. Things have
No, but this stuff's interesting. It's this is kind of like post-industrial society. We better get used to it. I think there'll be lots of people who are kind of talking about this in their work because we're kind of the generation where just making things is kind of going away. Human beings making things is going away. There's not going to all of a sudden be loads more people doing industrial jobs. This is we'll look back on this period like people look back on the Industrial Revolution now. It'll seem archaic. So I think writing about it is sort of important, like the sort of the end of the kind of the working man, the working stiff, the kind of like the grime on his neck at the end of the day. This is how people live their lives for most of the last century and a lot of this one so far as well. And it's kind of going away. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, maybe in a fun way, with Monster Dimensions.
You need the Monster Dimension break.
Sure.
To kind of get you through all of the oh my God, this town is dead. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I actually there's like vape shops in the town that John wrote, and I'm like, that's so perfect. That's like, oh God, like it's just a strange turn over time. I think. I don't want to get too political about it because then you'll get angry hits, I guess, on your YouTube. But yeah, it's like that post-Reagan.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
all of that, like but how they gutted the working class kind of.
Yep.
So
Yeah, no,
American politics.
and I, it's not coming back ever.
No,
you
it's
know?
not. I mean, will we go back to like that strong like labor force that we had 50, 60 years ago? No. But there's, I think you also got to look forward to and kind of see how you can make everything work as much as it can for everybody. I don't,
I mean, I think the big problem today, I mean, is if we want to talk politics for 5 minutes,
5 seconds.
is just, it's the gig economy and how it's turning workers into like a race to the bottom. Who can work the hardest for the least amount of money for corporations? It's just rent seeking. It's,
it's a very large, difference between the people with money and the people who don't have it. And that's for a number of reasons. And I'm not, and you also are seeing a big turnover in terms of like the kinds of jobs that are available, like what kind of skills are applicable. And I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know how you fix any of that. I know I've seen some stuff that I think are really good ideas, and I hope we employ them, and people can get over their own ego to do the right thing. Yeah.
You're just going to have to make Americans not afraid of the word socialism. Which that's the part that doesn't seem likely.
Well, I mean, you got to balance it there too, because it's aspects of it work and aspects of it don't. And you need to kind of be aware of, obviously we have, blueprints in other countries, what was working and what isn't. And how do we best apply that for our population, which is always going to be different than another population. I'm always wary of the big brother government eye a little bit, not in terms of like, boo, we shouldn't share everything, but in terms of like, oh, who's in charge of this? Like that also worries me too. And so I guess it's...
And monetizing our every breath. That's the part that starts to freak me out. Right.
Anyway, I don't want to get stuck in there.
And meanwhile, you guys are about to crash out of the UK any day now without a plan.
Yes, it's a fun time to be an Englishman, Brian. Good times. Everything Christine says is right, and again, that's why I'm kind of trying to write about like the dignity of work and things like that. I think it's just about giving people. The book is kind of about people trying in this difficult situation where the jobs are either not good if you want to stay where you are, or you don't have a job anymore, and it's sort of about the dignity of people, kind of striving when their opportunities are being taken away from them in a way. I think and you talk about the gig economy and things like that, you just have to look at what you're doing. When you pay for someone to bring you a sandwich, when you could have walked and got that sandwich in half an hour or driven and got that sandwich, maybe you should look and go, how much is that guy getting paid who's come to my door, who's probably come all the way from a country far away, having already got a degree in that country in order to deliver your sandwich. It's like, maybe you should just go and get the sandwich yourself the way we always used to. I'm trying to really look at my decisions that way these days. I shouldn't be paying next to nothing for a ride right across town from one suburb to another. It's like, that doesn't make sense. You couldn't do that in the past. Somebody's getting kind of stuffed here, and I think if we look at what people are worth and think everybody's worth the same that we're worth, maybe we wouldn't do those things.
Yeah. Very much agreed. Very much agreed. Well, big themes for a book that's about monsters.
I feel like a lot of that is subtext. You know what I mean? You would have to read. You have to read it. It's not like.
I don't think it's subtext though.
Like someone's coming in cold, like, oh God, I'm ready for this. But I think it's there. It's just it's a backdrop. It's like any backdrop. It's good to have an idea where you want to go thematically with something like that. How are you going to portray the people in this town and around and all that stuff?
So what's next then? Are you guys going to do a season 2, or are you going to work on something else?
We're done, right? Are we done? I'm working on
We
issue
haven't.
12.
There's no talk of a second season now. It may be that when the books are come out, if they do well, that Boom come back and say we want some more. At which point, I imagine Kristen and I will saddle up like a couple of old folks, get back on those horses, or maybe some fresh horses, and ride out again. But at the moment, there's no plans past the initial 12 issues. But who knows?
I feel good about the 12 issues and like let it sit, and who knows? 5 years from now, they may want something, or it may just live as it is. And I'm going to assume we're going to put out the trades, right? The mini trades, and I'm waiting for the full book because they always repackage.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I have other things planned when I'm done with 12. So I know John has other stuff to go on to, and it's nice to let something sit.
Okay.
Let it sit for a while.
So what else do you have coming up that you can talk about?
What can I talk about?
Plug away, I guess, is what I was trying to do.
All right, well, I'll let John go first, and I'll think about what I can actually.
All right, John, you plug away. What do you got? What else do you got coming up?
Well, you're going to enjoy how little I can tell you about what I've got coming up because nothing has been announced. Yeah. So I'm working on a book for a publisher that I am writing and drawing.
Publisher, really?
Yeah.
A publisher. This publisher you know from many other comics. Some big, some small. I can tell you they're an American publisher based on the west coast of America. That's right. So there you go. Take your pick. And that's, I'm writing and drawing that. And then Giant Days, next issue is issue 50. And then the final issue will be double-sized issue 55, that's all that winds up at the end of this year. And then I'm working on a project that will follow that indirectly, if you like, a further expansion of my broader comics universe. But again, a sort of another very deliberate slice off the old loaf of bread.
I'm just out of curiosity, pure curiosity here. Why are you ending at issue 55 rather than say issue 50?
Because there are 18 issues per college year in the book, and I only wanted it to run to the end of their undergraduate degree, which would have taken you to issue 54, but that's not divisible by 4, and there are 4 issues in a trade. So it has to go 2 more. Now, that may sound brutal, but that's the truth.
No, I like that. That's good. Sometimes it's important to know how the sausage is made. Yeah. You know?
Exactly. So at the sausage factory, I sat back and I said, how long is this sausage going to be? And they said to me, well, it can be 52 sausages or it can be 54 sausages. And I said, how about 56? And they're like, Mr. Allison, we're glad we're in business with you. And we all shook hands. And then I was, so issue 55, supersized issue 55, which is 2 issues in one, is the final issue. And then, I shall roll on to pastures new.
Very good. Very good. I'm sure we're all wanting more of that.
All right, I'll be super vague also. I am working on my first graphic novel that I'm writing and drawing. Nice. And that should be coming out next year. Also for a publisher, also a West Coast publisher. And I won't get too much into that, but it was, I'm stoked on it.
Yeah.
It's probably my dream job to have. So hopefully other people like it when I finish it. And aside from that, heavy metal, I did 8 pages in that. Then their collection for, oh my God, my brain just shut down. They're, not Anthrax, Megadeth. Thank you, brain. And their Megadeth anthology. So I have 8 pages in that, and that's like a little folk horror thing. And then I have a pitch I'm working on for another publisher.
Nice.
Yeah, just keep rolling, keep going. And, then my own stuff, which is its own animal, like, my own self-published stuff that, maybe one day I'll pitch it or maybe it's just mine forever.
Yeah. I'm curious about the original graphic novel. Is this a big change for you to work in that much larger format?
So I've been self-publishing my own stuff for a while. So I've done, I would say, graphic novellas. This is probably the first large format graphic novel. I pitched it as a 12 issue, but because of the age range, it would just work better as a graphic novel. Yeah. So I just restructured it a little bit. Got to add more stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, it came from some of my self-published stuff that I pitched. So, I like to workshop and then self-publish, and then I try to pitch it later.
Yeah.
I'm not a very efficient writer,
Sure.
so that takes me the longest.
Sure. Well, I mean, most creative people are not great business people necessarily because they're creative people.
Oh yeah, I mean,
know?
whenever I try to work on a character, or whenever I'm doing character stuff or coming up with an idea that's mine, I usually will do small stories with them so I could get to know them better, and then I'm ready to do something larger.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm stoked with that.
Yeah. Neat. Very neat. Well, the book has been By Night. My guests have been Christine Larsen and then Mr. John Allison from the UK. Thank you both for participating. I want to thank, I always forget to do this at the top of the show because I'm horrible. I want to thank the Comix Beat, the news website who is our sponsor, and where this will be broadcast at some point because they're great to be a sponsor for this. Next month, our book is Cannonball by Kelsey Rotten. Kelsey, hold on, I have all of my notes over here. Let me pull them out. Kelsey is here on, it's there. May 22nd, will be that broadcast. That'll be back to an 8 o'clock in the evening, since you were asking about when we normally do them. This is a great book. Everyone's going to love this book. It's a really good book. And then the month after that, we have Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. And she's going to, Maya's going to be here in person to talk to us about this. So that's going to be really good. Our next Kids Club book is Pilu of the Woods by Mai Nguyen. You should come to that. And then we also have Stan Sakai coming in June, and Ben Passmore and Ezra Clayton Daniels coming in 2 weeks on May 24th. So go to our website, comicsexperience.com. There's an events tab that has all of these things listed. Boy, do we do a lot of events. They're cool, though.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for participating.
Yeah, totally fine.
And thank you, John, for taking the time
Thank you.
to call in. And I recommend that everybody at home go out and get a copy of By Night. It is a fantastic book. It's funny, it's smart, it's got some subtext politics that are text as well, and it's got monsters.
Yeah.
So what else do you need?
Nothing else. Literally nothing.
Yeah. Thank you very much.